predicting what's going to happen on college campuses this new year. Next on the Campus Roundup. Hello, I'm Dr. Duke, and this is the Campus Roundup at the College Fix. Our top story segment today focuses on predictions for the new year, what to expect out of colleges and universities in 2019. When it comes to higher education, the outlook is often quite grim. That's because every year things seem to get worse and worse. Administrators in charge never learn from their mistakes. Newly tenured professors act more radical than the ones they've replaced. The curriculum presented by far too many professors remains filled with one-sided biases that paint this country as racist and sexist. And of course, social justice warriors do their business on campus, making them very unpleasant places to be if you're not a radical progressive. To talk more about this and what we can predict for the upcoming 2019 academic school year, we welcome Jennifer Kabani, the editor of the College Fix. Happy New Year, Jennifer, and thanks for joining us.
Happy New Year.
You've got some really cool predictions, things that are going to happen. Now, again, we've already sort of suggested that predicting the way that universities are going to continue to go is not. It's kind of low-hanging fruit. But let's start with the first one. More censorship. This is a really important one. You guys have done a lot of great stories at the Fix about this. Talk about more censorship coming our way on college campuses.
Yeah, so based on what we've seen in 2018, the left is going to continue to crack down and clamp down on any idea that they deem to be verboten, that you cannot discuss. Remember, we had several journals either pull papers, meaning they decided not to publish them after they'd been accepted, or take them down after they'd been published, because the left was so infuriated by the concepts they presented. Obviously we had disinvitations. We've had, the big tech join in on the censorship, Google, Facebook, YouTube. So it's really looking grim when it comes to censorship in 2019.
Yeah, it does seem odd, though, too, that this censorship always cuts one way. It seems like there's nothing too liberal, too radical. There's nothing too nasty you can say if you're coming from a left-wing perspective. But anything that is not sufficiently liberal gets cracked down on pretty dramatically.
Yeah, I mean, even like we've seen plays canceled because the students didn't like the content of the play. We've seen comedians get yanked off stage because the students were offended by their jokes. I mean, there's so many examples to pull from of just this politically correct culture and bubble that college students live on. And they are not willing to relinquish control or allow ideas that make them feel uncomfortable to be discussed. So I definitely predict more censorship in 2019.
Yeah, and it's interesting, isn't it, that they are censoring speech, censoring people's presences on college campuses. I think about what happened at Gonzaga University, where they wrote a very long reason why they could not have Ben Shapiro speak while hosting some seriously radical people on the left over the last couple of months, really remarkably anti-American leftists. So it goes to show you that the censorship is getting worse. And our number one topic, censorship, in terms of predictions, it really does bleed nicely into our second topic. It's public enemy number one, white Christian heterosexual males. It seems like the groups of people you can scapegoat on the left keeps getting smaller and smaller, doesn't it? Talk about the cisgendered white male.
Well, one thing that we know is public enemy number one on the college campus is the white Christian heterosexual male. They are blamed for all the evils of the world, all the evils of this nation. They're the problem. To get rid of them is part of the solution. We've even had stories where, colleges are trying to reduce the number of white people on campus. That was one of our biggest stories of 2018. We see white privilege conferences. We see Christian privilege conferences where, the academics sort of bemoan and blame, white Christian males for all the problems that this nation faces and campuses face. And, I feel bad for college kids nowadays. They go to school, they have to keep their head down and try to survive without being blamed or tarred and feathered. It's a pretty bad situation for them.
And nobody wants to talk about the fact that since the early 1980s, we're talking a long time ago, since the early 1980s, young women have gone to college at rates much higher than young white men. Women on college campuses now dominate the number of scholarships awarded. Women dominate almost across the disciplines. And just this year, a story out that there are now more women at the undergraduate level studying STEM careers than there are men. And yet you will not see any attempt to redress this imbalance because, again, you've got to have scapegoats if you're a progressive. And I'm already beginning to see on my college campus, Jen, the argument that if you are white, Christian, heterosexual, and male, but you're poor, you still qualify maybe for some victim slots.
Oh, absolutely. Everything boils down to the left to the color of your skin. They care not about the content of your character or what you've been through in life, what you've gone through, the hurdles you've overcome or the challenges you faced. They see everything through the lenses of racism, sexism, classism. And so they judge you before they even get to know you. And there's no end in sight to this. The left is supposedly tolerant and inclusive, but their actions speak louder than their words.
I think of all the first two items that you predicted, I think are exactly spot on. I think the third one, however, may be the most alarming and should get the most people upset. It's the soft bigotry of low expectations. I think what's happening here is to get the kind of radical, progressive, and ideological, quote unquote, diversity they want, they have to lower standards. They have to lower admission standards. They have to stop teaching important books, big works. They're focusing much more on the small, not the big. Talk about the soft bigotry of low expectations and what colleges and universities are doing to kind of dumb their students down.
So for several years now, we've been seeing more and more colleges do away with an SAT or ACT score requirement. Back in the day, in the 80s and 90s, everything rode on the SAT. Students would study, for months and months to prepare to get a great grade for that so that they could have a leg up in their college admissions process. But what we're finding now is that universities over the last several years, there's a trend to say, okay, you know what, never mind, forget the SAT, forget the ACT. We're just going to, read your essay and look over your, high school transcripts and decide for ourselves whether you should come to our school. The problem is it takes away all objectivity of intelligence, determination of how hard this person studied for the test, what they're capable of doing on their intelligence levels, and just kind of brings it to a subjective hodgepodge of holistic admissions. And gone are the days when hard work was rewarded. Instead of encouraging students to fight hard, study hard, be the best they can be, instead of setting the bar high and encouraging students to jump over that bar, they just keep lowering it and lowering it and lowering it, really insulting the intelligence of all Americans, no matter what part of life they came from. They're capable of great things, but according to college admissions officials, they're not capable of great things, and they have to lower the bar, or in this case, do away with SAT scores in order to get the student body that they deem proper or appropriate.
That's right. In order to get the kind of diversity on campuses they want, which isn't really intellectual diversity at all, it's much more of the everybody look different but think the same mentality. They almost have to lower the standards. The bellwether for this, of course, is Harvard University. If you take a look at what Harvard's doing, you'll see what's going to happen in the rest of the country, I think. And Harvard, of course, is now being sued in the federal courts for discriminating against Asians. And what is this discrimination? Well, Asian students tend to do better on entrance exams like SATs and ACTs, and therefore they would be overrepresented on Harvard's campus. So actively, Harvard is pulling those scores apart and arguing that they don't matter so they can get more kids on campus who aren't Asian. And the same Harvard University, one of these remarkable stories, David Hogg, the radical activist in the Parkland shooting, the young man who applied, who's all over the news criticizing the NRA, oftentimes gets his facts wrong, very often gets his facts wrong when he cites statistics and analyzes the circumstances. Nevertheless, he's been rejected from every second-tier university, it seems, in this country, but Harvard University just accepted him on campus with his relatively low-performing scores.
Yeah, see, they no longer want to reward hard work and dedication. They're rewarding ideology and the victim mentality. You write an essay into Harvard, complaining how you're a victim, and you'll probably get in nowadays. And so it just goes to show you how far Harvard has fallen. And it's also unfortunate because it's sending a message to kids across the nation that it doesn't matter how hard you work. It doesn't matter what you achieve. We're going to, equal out everything. And that's kind of what socialism is built on, is this idea that those in charge will equal everything out, no matter how hard you work. It sort of creates this hopeless picture, and it dumbs down the society.
Yeah, and David Hogg is one of these kids who couldn't even get into the University of Central Florida, for instance, which doesn't have the highest standards in the world. You almost wonder, you see how the left is at odds with itself. You wonder whose spot was bumped at Harvard to allow another white male like David Hogg in, simply because he's a big activist guy. He's on a lot of the news programs, and he's going after the targets that the American left hates, like the NRA. And that bleeds into the fourth prediction really well: increased tactics. Talk about how tactically universities are going about implementing their social justice revolution on college campuses, and what you predict for this upcoming school year.
So this really became to the forefront of the nation's awareness when the situation at Mizzou, the University of Missouri, where a group of students took over the campus, made demands, and it ended up with the chancellor and the president of the university resigning. And ever since then, there was a slew of campus activists that took on those same tactics. They would sit in a building, camp out in a building, eat, sleep in the building, and they wouldn't leave until their demands were met. And that happened for many years, from 2015 until 2017, and even into 2018. We saw at UC Santa Cruz, they commandeered a building, made demands, and quickly the administration folded within a couple of days. But there have been a couple of pushbacks from administrators who are starting to say, okay, you need to vacate the building. They've realized their mistake they made by giving in so quickly. And a new approach is coming, even stronger approach, where now some TAs and faculty are saying, we're just not going to hand out grades unless you give in to our demands. I mean, remember at UNC, first they forcibly tore down the Silent Sam statue. And then after the campus officials were like, well, it has to come back to campus by law, they're like, okay, well, we're not going to give any grades out then, as a sort of holding students' grades hostage tactic. So I think we're going to see the radical left continue to up the ante so they can get their way on college campuses.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Not only whenever a group of kids, and it could be a small group of kids, we're talking 13, 14, 15, 20 kids in a college campus, if they're all demanding the same thing and there's ample minority representation among that group, universities stop what they're doing, and 9 times out of 10 they concede. And so there's a tremendous amount of power here, and I think the faculty are beginning to see this as well. What you mentioned at the University of North Carolina is powerful. You have a group of teaching assistants now. These are basically graduate students who are there to get a degree and teaching a little bit, refusing to turn in their grades. They're holding as hostage their students' grades until the Silent Sam statue is banished from campus. I think you're going to see a lot more of that too. But let's not leave in this 2019 new year. Let's not leave on a note of negativity. There are a few bright sparks, aren't there, out there, Jen? So give us a sense of how the right is beginning to fight back on college campuses, and what do you predict for 2019 with regards to those issues?
Yes, this is definitely ending on a high note, because I think right of center students, libertarian students are basically really just sick of it. They're sick of being called names, being attacked by the left, who just judges them and calls them racist, sexist, this, that, the other, without even getting to know them, without even engaging in the arguments they have to present, without even debating them. And I think the right's just sick of it. And they're finally growing a really strong backbone, and they're standing up for themselves, and they're not letting somebody calling them a name shut them down or silence them. So we see a lot of groups really taking a couple of different approaches. One thing is the college Republicans. A lot of college Republican chapters around campuses around the nation are kind of getting a little bit more, in their face with some of the things they've done. For example, at UT Austin, they held signs defending Brett Kavanaugh and boldly stood their ground, even as a huge mob of students surrounded them and yelled at them and ripped up their signs. But they weren't going to be intimidated. They were going to stand up for due process and what was right. So I've seen similar examples from college Republican groups that are really sort of taking a more proactive approach rather than just meeting in campus rooms and trying to go door to door for the local Republican candidates. That's one thing that's definitely been encouraging.
Yeah, another thing that I think is really exciting is you watch. It's unfortunate how many of these courses that these issues are beginning to funnel off of campus and into the courtrooms. But it's really a shocking number of conservative kids who've won, or kids who are being persecuted by their universities. Once they get outside the campus kangaroo courts, they're finding that they're winning in court again and again and again. And universities are getting rebuked by judges at the district and federal levels about the way they're treating kids with dissenting opinions. And that's a really good sign as well.
Absolutely. We have one group, the Young America's Foundation, has started upping their civil litigation game, and they're seeing successes. They won against UC Berkeley recently, receiving attorney's fees and forcing that university to amend its free speech policies to be more pro First Amendment. They just sued the University of Florida on similar grounds. The Foundation for Individual Rights and Education has also been, demanding free speech on college campuses, public ones where they have to because it's the law. And 9 times out of 10, they win these lawsuits. So it's really exciting to see that they're taking this approach to the courts and are winning. And also, Betsy DeVos at the Department of Education is making due process great again, right? Where she's revising some of the Obama-era guidelines that really created all these campus kangaroo courts that took rights away from the accused, and bringing the scales back to equality, where you're innocent until proven guilty.
Let's treat our college kids as individuals and not part of collectives, and due process then makes perfect sense. Jennifer Cabani, it's always a pleasure to speak with you. Be sure to stay up on all the latest news and information from the College Fix by joining us on all of our social media platforms. For the Campus Roundup, I'm Dr. Duke, and we'll see you next time.